ain't afraid no more. I ain't afraid to say. And if the words are clear, I know that I can say. Busting out the rules that take control. Busting out a love in my soul. Busting out a dream that won't be sold. I said no. Busting fear. Busting fear. Busting fear. Busting fear.
Well, thank you once again, Bobby Lee, for being so faithful and showing up every time. Every time so far.
For you, Carol, I wouldn't miss it for the world.
Thank you so much.
You betcha.
Well, folks, I want to say welcome to another episode of Busting Fear. And this is a live call-in talk show. And again tonight we have Katie with us because Dixie is on a retreat with her house. I think she's trying to sell it. That's up in Bickleton, Washington. And then Sue, of course, is in Arkansas, communicating with amethyst crystals in some cave, and she's helping her daughter who's going to have another child. And so tonight we want to talk about some topics where my buttons got pushed last week. If any of you happened to watch Underground, that was a really good discussion between Mike Fisher, the general manager, Adrian, the host of Underground, and then Michael Petrovich came up and he shared some further thoughts. So as these gentlemen were talking, I wanted to run up and I wanted to insert some of my thoughts, so I thought I would just save them for this show. And so tonight I'm going to share some of those things where my buttons got pushed, and hopefully Katie will join in and share her thoughts if anything is triggered in her mind. And of course, we want to help all of you out there bust through fear that might get you locked into a matrix. And we have come across, in fact, Michael has come across some very revealing information about the illusion of this fear matrix that is actually orchestrated with a plan to carry out to a very specific agenda. So last week there were a couple of things that were brought up. There was a little bit of chat about marijuana. And I happened to be, this is probably about 3 weeks ago, I happened to be watching BBC America, and there was a lady on who had cancer, and she shared a way to use hemp oil that would be much more effective than taking the hemp oil via the mouth. Now, you can take hemp oil orally, or she said to use it as a suppository up the rectum. Now, what happens when you do that, she shared, was that when you take hemp oil through the stomach and it has THC in it, then you're going to get high, but you only get about 30% absorption into the body. If you use the hemp oil with the THC in it and you use it as a suppository, you get 70% absorption and you don't get the THC high side effects. Now, as far as I understand, for using hemp oil, it's legal in all states if it does not have the THC in it and only the CBD. Now, I could be wrong on that, but that's the information I read probably about 3 months ago or so. And of course, here in the state of Washington, all restrictions are pretty much off now, and you can use it and smoke it. But I think hemp oil is much more effective, and it's much more potent, so that's something to consider. Oh, another thing that was brought up on Underground last week is that Mike Fisher says he's turned off his TV and he's no longer watching the news. Well, he's not watching the right news channels. I've been watching BBC America and Al Jazeera, and what I have discovered is that governments are just as corrupt in any other country, and there's collusion, and there is hiding of pedophilia in upper echelons of business and government and people that are in power, and it is used to blackmail people that have been caught or have been forced into doing these kinds of activities so they can control them. This is a worldwide phenomena, and it is psychopathic. And it is not something that we should be supporting. And when you know about these things, I mean, it can really tear you up inside and cause some sleepless nights. But this is the horror of what does happen on the planet. Now, also in the meantime, fortunately, if you're looking for it, you can find the better side of life. In my studies, one of the sentences that I just love, it says, all things are lesson that the divine would have us learn. And it just depends on if you understand the metaphor. Many things are metaphors. And you're going to get much more out of the Bible if you look at it as a metaphor, not necessarily literal. The other thing that came up last week on Underground, Adrian shared his journey as to how he chose to be an atheist. And I appreciated that because it helped me to understand his journey so much better. And he had a crisis of consciousness, and he had to conclude that the suffering in the world really disturbed him. And so he also realized that if he had to walk away and stop believing in God or the divine would not take offense at that. And there's no reason to, because the divine doesn't need you to be locked in. The divine will allow you to have your journey. The thing I want to add is that when you limit yourself to a God or not God, there might be another choice. And in fact, on Ancient Aliens on the History Channel, a Catholic priest was on, and you know Catholic priests don't say these kinds of statements if it's not sanctioned, but he did hint that maybe the gods that people are saying are gods aren't gods, but maybe they are aliens with superior technology. When you think about it, it could be very possible. So it might not be a divine source isn't available or not here. It's just that the divine source didn't set this stuff up, but some other non-terrestrial being had an agenda, and they set some things up to hide, to deceive, to control people and get them to do things that probably are less than human. And some of that energy has carried on today. There are some energies that are still manifesting.
You know what puzzles me, Carol? I am horrified at what goes on in this world, right in our own backyard, but across the country or across the world. And what I can't figure out, if you look at history, what we know of it, it's just over and over and over. Violence, war, upheaval, man treating man with horrible lack of compassion and sensitivity and spirit. And we never seem to learn. Doesn't that strike you as strange?
I think we do learn, but because of the psychopathic systems in place, they don't let go. They have an iron grip on manipulating the matrix to keep you in fear and to prevent people from waking up.
And fear will trigger violence, always.
Yes.
It justifies wars, it justifies violence, it justifies hurting other people. But when I say we never learn, I don't mean individually.
Right.
I mean collectively, we don't seem to get it. We just don't seem to I mean, you would think by now, after thousands of years, we would figure out how not to kill other people, and that it doesn't pay. We don't get further ahead for that.
Right.
Nobody gains, nobody wins.
Right. In other words, the divine doesn't need another dead person. I mean,
yeah.
There's no benefit to another dead person. In fact, a person's journey has been cut short to where they may have been able to make a connection.
And what I've wondered about, and I don't know much about UFOs and aliens. I think they exist because enough people have had enough experiences. I've seen some UFOs myself. But I'm wondering if we're not just set up, I know this sounds crazy, but I can say it here.
Yes.
I'm wondering if we're not just set up for the amusement of some, aliens.
I wonder that myself.
They come and watch us and all the turmoil and what have you, and they keep things stirred up. And I'm not saying it's all their fault. We're certainly participating in it, but it just seems like there's more going on than we know.
Well, there's more going on than they will ever reveal. In fact, this week I found an interview on YouTube by Dan Aykroyd. David Sereda interviewed him, and Dan Aykroyd talked about these very things. And as I listened to Dan Aykroyd share his thoughts about the paranormal and aliens or not aliens, he shared some exact thoughts that I've had myself, but I've never said to anybody. And I'm going, my mouth is on my lap going, oh, he thinks and considers things kind of like I do. And doesn't mean I make a good comedian or a good actress, but but it's just nice to know that there's someone else that considered some of these things. And he talked about intradimensional, extra-dimensional, there's possibly good, there's possibly nefarious, there's a whole range of possibilities. And I don't think, we call this world or some phenomena you can't explain or can't understand, or you can't, photograph it or whatever, and they call it paranormal. I think there's nothing paranormal. I think it's just all normal, and we have to label it to put it in a box to define it. In fact, I saw Dan Aykroyd, I think there was a comment on that interview about someone saying, oh, they're all demons. Well, we don't know that.
No.
That puts phenomena in a box. We don't even know what demons really are. That's just a label we put on them to have a common communication about it.
And I have an opinion on that.
Thank you.
You'll be
Yay.
happy to know.
Okay.
Because I watch a lot of, I watch the Dead Files and ghost shows and what have you. And
Me too.
I love that kind of stuff.
Me too.
But I really like the Dead Files because the medium on there will see creatures that are not even human.
Oh,
And she has said a couple times that she thinks they're alien in origin.
yes.
But I think that everything that's on the astral plane, that is bad. It's a pretty scary place.
Dark. On the dark.
Is made by man. I do think we
Okay.
create that out of our fear.
Okay.
I think we create if we give allegiance to a fear long enough, we create the enemy, and it may be in one we can't even see on the astral. And I think the only way out of that is to raise our consciousness so that the astral can't even come close to our vibration. And that's by realizing that we don't give in to fear. We all do occasionally.
Yes.
But to say, okay, this might be scary, I may not understand it, but I know I have a higher purpose.
Yes.
And now, you could be atheist. That's a spiritual path, as far as I'm concerned. They might not like hearing that. But it doesn't matter. We're all on different paths, but it's all to getting out of this soup of negativity that we're stuck in. And I that's an individual saying, I have a higher purpose. Now, I don't know who. Maybe it's God that gave me that purpose. Maybe it's a saint, or maybe it's reincarnation, whatever it is. You can figure that out for yourself. But once you figure out that you're more than just a body, that there's meaning to your life, as chaotic as it might look, then you can start to not give in to all those things pulling on you and people pulling on you. And it's a difficult place to get, because fear is pretty overwhelming. That's what we have to deal with on this plane.
Yes.
It's how to overcome fear. Because there's really only fear or love. That's all
That's
there
right.
is. That's
That's
your
right.
choice, fear or love.
Everything is a derivative of
Exactly.
fear or love.
Exactly.
Yes. I was noticing commercials on television. It's all about the physical. It's all about the physical, the physical, the physical.
Because that's the
It's
level
all
you
about
buy
the
at. That's
yeah.
the level that produces money and income.
Yeah. I was thinking, where are the commercials about raising your thoughts or your ideas to solving world problems or problems that are low. See, there's no money in fixing things.
No, there's not. And a lot of people make money off of war, especially in
Yes.
the United States. They make a fortune off of it. And it may be possible that until enough people, you've heard of the 100th monkey theory?
However, that's not real. It's just a theory. There was never any 100 monkeys consciousness jumped to another. It was just a conversation. I know a lot of people use it, but it's not a real
Well, I
phenomenon.
still think whether you call it that or not, there's a group consciousness that we're a part of.
Yes.
And if you raise that, if that gets raised to a certain level, then it kind of raises other people up with it. And call it what you will. I do believe that happens. So all we can do, we can't control someone else's spiritual journey.
That's right.
All we can do is control our own, and try not to give in to fear ourselves, and that's a big enough challenge right there.
Absolutely. I do want to remind any callers that this is a live call-in talk show, and the number is 360-693-7544. 360-693-7544, and Mike in the Whisper Room informs me we have 5 viewers.
Oh, wow.
And there's the Whisper Room. That's Mike. That's Rebecca, and Ginger, and Dan. They're working in the Whisper Room, making this show happen. Valerie. Oh, and Valerie. Sorry, I didn't see you, Valerie. Couldn't see you in the camera. So thank you, folks in the Whisper Room, for making this happen. Well, you just brought up war, and Michael Petrovich just got a report from John Rappaport about a PR insider that manipulated they manipulate everything. Okay, so I'm going to read some of this here, so just stop me. But I got about 3 pages to get through, so
Okay.
if you want to comment. Authority equals freedom. Listen to the authorities, do what they say, and you will be led into the sky of freedom. This contradiction is pure cartel. We have just emerged from a phase called the Cold War. What is this all about? Well, for Americans, it is summarized in the following. In order to protect the American way of life, we must be strong. In order to be strong, we must obey our military and political leaders and do exactly what they say. National security must be placed above personal freedom. In other words, let's pretend. Let's pretend that the conflict between America and the Soviet Union was real, that it was born in a difference of outlook about freedom and collective control. In truth, the Cold War was staged at the highest level of the cartels. It was a cartel op. This op was in the planning stage before World War II even started. The Cold War was pure George Orwell. If you have not read Orwell's novel 1984, he strongly suggests that you do this. The Cold War was a pristine cartel op which would cast 2 great enemies into the spotlight. Both America and the USSR would justify enormous expenditures and the further curtailment of civil liberties on the basis that everything had to be subordinated to the struggle for victory. Lies would be told to the American people and the USSR. Many lies. Both populations would be given grisly portraits of the enemy that would be unverifiable. Lost in all of this would be the simple fact that the citizens of America and of the USSR were not the enemies of one another. Through media and political manipulation, messages would be communicated to the American and Soviet citizens. Obey authority. Obedience is freedom. Slavery is freedom. Lies are the truth. Lies are necessary. Victory is all. Lies will result in freedom. The enemy is stupid. The enemy is clever. The enemy is tireless. The enemy is strong. We must be stronger. Obedience is strength, and so on. One of the great purposes of the Cold War was the strengthening of the media cartel. All important information would come from the elite media. The public would be hypnotized to accept the media as a single vital source of all important information.
Can I interrupt?
Yes, please.
Well, one thing that really has frustrated me for years is that if you watch especially the national channels, CBS, NBC, how much news do you get? It's mostly entertainment about a new movie coming out that usually CBS owns, or it's 15 seconds on a story that they could talk about for hours, you know, if they were going to give you in-depth information. Getting news accurately in this country is like pulling teeth without any anesthetic, taking a pair of pliers.
Further in this article, I don't have it in this part that I want to share here, this gentleman talks about the difference between events and issues. They leave the events up to the editorial people. The events are what they report, not issues.
Yeah, exactly. So they give you so little information that it's like you're sitting there going, is that all I'm going to hear about this? It's an important topic, and they just flow right over it.
Well, wait till you hear the rest of what this says here. Okay. They're setting the stage for a future in which citizens would implicitly accept pictures of reality presented by the media. The Cold War was formed in order to plant the idea that there always is an enemy. The cartels operate on the basis that in order to lead the mass of people, you must direct their emotions toward an enemy. That mobilizes people. That keeps them in line. Without an enemy, the people will soon grow tired of external control. They will naturally drift into a more natural freedom. The cartels know that they must derail this drifting.
And how do they do that? They instill fear.
Yes.
If we don't go to Iraq, if we don't do
Yep.
this, they could come here and they're blowing us up with atom
Exactly.
bombs. And people buy into that. I'm not saying there isn't an element of truth. Obviously, 9/11 did happen.
Yes.
But yeah, if you can keep people afraid, you can control them.
Yes. Well, I just read earlier they were telling lies to both Americans and the people in USSR about how bad each other was.
Oh, yeah.
And when I was a child and I heard this, I thought, I don't have any bad feelings toward people of Russia.
No, I thought that too. I like the Russians.
Yeah, I've met some of them, and they're just very sweet people.
Yeah.
As the Cold War proceeded, it became apparent in the cartels that absolute control was slipping away from them. More and more people were becoming suspicious of arbitrary authorities on all fronts: financial, political, medical, and informational. Therefore, paradoxically, the solution became end the Cold War and create new enemies to feed the level of emotion in people that has been trained to focus on an enemy. Make new and better enemies. Gorbachev, a cartel cutout who could be used for many ops, was set loose to bring down the Soviet Union as the easiest way to end the Cold War. Then came the new and improved war on drugs, war on cancer, war on terrorism, war on crime, war on killer viruses.
None of which have worked.
That's right.
They're totally unsuccesful. That's not to say they haven't made some progress in cancer treatment or whatever, but certainly on poverty. Remember what a fiasco that was. That didn't help.
How much money do they have to keep having thrown at them to fix it? It's never going to get fixed because they keep the money. The money keeps coming in.
You can't bring out people out of poverty by just throwing money at the
right.
problem.
That's right. The war on drugs would be used as a cover story for funding elite military groups in the U.S. and abroad who would supposedly crush the drug trade. In fact, these army groups abroad would aid dictator governments in smashing incipient revolution in their countries, keeping cartel politicians in place. In the U.S., military troops would become a recognized presence in fighting drugs, even though such actions are against the law. The American Federal Police and the American military would begin to blend, making it difficult to tell the difference between one group and another. America would move closer to a military state. The war on cancer would become a means for elevating the doctor in people's eyes to the level of supreme authority, a priest. This war would try to divert people from the fact that much cancer is caused by chemical companies and their products. This war would instill fear fear of cancer and possible cancer virus and a possible cancer gene.
Can I interrupt again?
Yes, please.
Let me tell you about Laetrile. Laetrile is found in apricots, in the pit of apricots. You can no longer buy the pits. You used to be able to buy the toss-off from the factory that was canning apricots. You could buy as many pits as you want, and you crack them open, and there's a little like almond nut in there. It's Laetrile. Well, there was a man, I wish I remembered his name, but I don't, but he was a doctor, and he discovered that Laetrile helped people with cancer. Not if they waited too long, and some people waited too long, but if they got it early enough. Now here's my story. I had a Scottish Terrier that was only a 1.5 years old. Her name was Bonnie. She got cancer of the lymph nodes. The vet told me she'd only live 6 months. I was devastated. So I went to, I don't know what drew me, but I went to this health food store that was back in that day. They didn't have many of them, but there was one on Hawthorne. And I went in and I asked for the manager. I said, I'm going to lose my Scotty. I said, is there anything I can give her that's natural that will help? He said, well, it's funny you should ask. He says, but Laetrile would help. But he said 2 weeks prior to my being there, the agency, the drug FDA came in, took all his supplies of Laetrile. They used to sell it in powder form, and they poured glue all over his whole supply of Laetrile. They did not reimburse him for it. They just marched in like a bunch of stormtroopers and poured glue over it. He had managed to, there were a couple packets that they hadn't gotten. He sold those to me, and he told me just to get apricots and break them open. And she was a 25-pound dog, so we figured maybe 5 apricot pits a day. We were kind of guessing. But I gave her the powder when that ran out. That we bought apricots and ate them for a year. Trust me, I can hardly eat an apricot today. My dog lived to be almost 15 years old.
How old was she when?
And they had taken out the lymph node. They had sent it to a lab, so they knew she had cancer.
How old was she when she had the cancer?
She was only 1.5 years. So Laetrile, what did they do? They ran, the doctor that discovered that Laetrile helped cancer, they ran him out of the country. He went to Mexico. There was an actor that got cancer. Matthew McConaughey
Played the character who made millions off of Laetrile from Mexico.
Okay, well he went to Mexico. It was some actor that got cancer, but he waited too long, and when he went to Mexico for Laetrile treatments, it didn't work. So that's what you hear. It doesn't work. Well, I can tell you, it worked on my Bonnie. My Scotty lived almost 15 years old with no cancer. Well, until the end. She had cancer at the end.
Well, we got just a few minutes left, and I think I have enough time just to finish up this section. No, that's all right. Mike is telling me how much time we have left. Okay, likewise, the war on terror and the war on crime would actually, through covert cartel ops, encourage crime and terrorism and bring more fear into the lives of people. Behind all this, the Orwellian world was being transformed by the cartels into a really predicted by another great novel, Brave New World by Aldous Huxley. The cartels realized that in order to maintain a high level of control over people, it would be necessary to develop technology that would affect brains and human energy centers, control through drugs, through brain-affecting drugs, through genetic insertion, through the use of electromagnetic energies to induce certain cooperative behavior, and the illusion of satisfaction and happiness regardless of external circumstances. This is the cartel goal for the 21st century, the Brave New World. So, last week Adrian talked about you voting and that it makes a difference. Well, this is my reply to that. Voting doesn't make a difference. It's all orchestrated, you're all manipulated. Sometimes I just wish the divine would send down his avenging angels and get rid of all the thugs.
Carol, I think
I'm just being honest.
Carol, on that we'll have to agree to disagree. I think voting's very important. I know that they stole the election from Al Gore.
Yeah.
I expected people to be marching in the streets over that.
Yeah.
I couldn't believe it. It was like barely a ripple, hardly any protest over that. And I do know that the elections are corrupt and getting more corrupt. I will still vote because that is a sacred right to me. But
Well, I voted for Roseanne last year, or whenever the last. She was on her soapbox in Washington, D.C. She had a little microphone and she was going down her list of things. And I thought her and Ron Paul would have made a good team because she was saying very similar things as Ron Paul. So, well, Bobby, I guess it's about time to close down the show here. And thank you very much for being so faithful and showing up all the time to share Busting Fear song. I so appreciate that.
For you, anything, Carol.
Boy, it goes fast.
I know.
It just whistles by.
I know.
I ain't afraid no more. I ain't afraid to say. And if the words are clear, I know that I can sing. Busting out the rules that take control. Busting out a dream in my soul. Busting out a love that won't be sold. I said no. Busting fair. Busting fair. Busting fair. Busting fair. Oh, thank you. Thank you. And my guitar, thank you. Waving everybody.
Hi, and welcome to Brood, your local cafe and pub. Offering you a variety of services, we have beer, coffee, wine, and food. You can find us on Facebook at Brood360 and online at broodcafepub.com.